For the next event, which is our concluding keynote lecture by Ufuk Akcigit of the University of Chicago on green innovation. And I will simply invite on screen now Suganda Srivastav from the University of Oxford to give the introduction and then move to the keynote lecture before we will go to the beer, pretzels, and wine session. But thank you so much to Professor Akcigit for accepting to address us from the University of Chicago. Thank you.
Hi everyone. I think my video should, well, it needs to be enabled by the host, but it's okay. You can all hear my voice, hopefully.
We're working on it. We'll be with you in a second.
Okay, great. Well, I'll wait 30 seconds then.
It's supposedly it is enabled. Can you try again on your side?
Yeah, I'm trying to enable it right now. So it's yeah, I'm clicking start video, but it's not working. So just let me know if I should.
We hear your voice well, so unfortunately then we'll have to do it without the image, but I think it would work this way as well.
Sure.
Thank you.
So anyway, since you can't see me, I'm Suganda Srivastav. I'm from the University of Oxford. I'm a British Academy postdoctoral fellow, and I work on innovation. So, of course, I have been reading all of Ufuk's papers throughout. Both my bachelor's, master's, and PhD programs, in fact. And so as a way of introduction, Professor Ufuk is at the University of Chicago and works on innovation. The way I've found Ufuk's work super helpful, at least, in my own sort of studies, is that it provides a really nice framework of thinking about sort of dynamism and also policies. He has some great papers on R&D policies. And in general, what we're seeing here is sort of just a huge body of work on taxation and optimal innovation policy, the role of firms, and even talking now about not just the macroeconomic side, but also some of his recent work on green innovation. And I'm particularly sort of excited to flag that I saw on the website that there's an upcoming book where John Van Reenen and Ufuk talk about creative destruction. So we'll probably be needing a lot of creative destruction in the energy transition when it comes to shifting away from hydrocarbons to clean energy. So I'm excited to see what will be contained in that book. And then I think, contextualizing it also in terms of the skills transition, Professor Ufuk has some interesting kind of recent work on sort of the sort of skill side and entrepreneurs. So I think, there's probably a lot to gain from that. So without me sort of going on and on about how I have found this literature useful, I might just hand over to Professor Ufuk himself to deliver this really interesting keynote. So hope you all enjoy, and please think of questions as this session goes along. I'm sure we all want it to be as dynamic and engaging as possible.
So thank you very much, Suganda, for this extremely generous introduction, and thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to participate in this very important conference. And so, of course, we are talking about the energy transition, but in general, Suganda mentioned a couple of things about my research, and just like anybody else's research, my research experience has been also a journey. So over the years, by building different models, looking. So somebody is saying that they cannot see me. Ömer Köksal is saying that they cannot see me, but I hope you are seeing me. I hope that's fine. Great. Okay. So it's been a journey, and so what I try to do from my perspective is that I try to combine microdata with economic theory, especially with general equilibrium models. And that way, we could also address important macroeconomic questions starting from micro frictions. And that's also where the importance of creating destruction came in, because even though, for instance, some public policies that we might think should be effective at the macro level, when we introduce a certain policy, we realize that it's not that effective. And then when you go to the micro level, you see that there are so many frictions at the micro level, and maybe people or firms are blocking each other. And Suganda absolutely made an excellent point. Indeed, energy transition is really the poster child of creative destruction, and it's a very, very hard one. So that's why over the years, through these research efforts, things start to come together a little bit more and more. And today I will try to share a little bit of some of my findings from my own research. So let me start with sharing my screen. I hope you all see my screen. And so the title of my talk will be Transition to Green Technology. And the big picture question here that we all ask is, how do we switch to clean technology in the best possible way? Obviously, we are all in this conference because, we believe that there's a consensus about the climate change due to greenhouse gas emissions. But the big picture question is, what are the best policy combinations or best policy tools to generate a clean technology transition in a welfare maximizing way? And that's not an easy question. Let's admit that that's not an easy question. And I will tell you how, me and my researchers try to address that issue. So first, we try to build a general equilibrium model. How do we attack this problem? First, technologies evolve like a quality ladder. So we are introducing better technologies, we are introducing better products. And as a result, the quality ladder literature was built explicitly to model these changes. So as a result, think about the early creative destruction models, a la Gian Havit, Grossman, Heltman, etc. So there are these products that we use in our everyday life, but every time there's a new innovation, the quality of that product goes up. So that's why at the back of our mind, there's always this quality ladder. But now, in the theme of this conference, there is dirty or brown technologies, and there are clean and green technologies. So then probably the single quality ladder structure is not sufficient. We should think about at least two ladders, where one of them is the dirty or brown technology ladder, which is more advanced, because over the many centuries we try to just improve and build on this ladder over time. And then now, these days, we are also trying to improve the green ladder. But the main difficulty here is that the green ladder is much less advanced or much more primitive relative to the dirty ladder. So then the question is, how can we switch to the green ladder in the welfare maximizing way? And firms, when they produce, they have these two possibilities: use the dirty technology or use the clean technology. What's the trade-off? Well, the trade-off is that first, dirty technologies are more advanced, but at the same time, dirty technologies emit, of course, and then there is some carbon cycle where oceans are absorbing some of that emission, but still there are still remainders in the long term, and then temperature rises. As a result, the society is observing this damage as a result. So that's why we built models. So I'm going to save you all these technical details, but this is roughly the model structure that we built to study this question: how should we switch to green technologies in a welfare maximizing way? But of course, when we think about the government's role, government can also influence the switch to green ladder in different ways. So first of all, companies are still investing in R&D, both in dirty technologies and also in green technologies. And we need to encourage firms to invest more in green R&D. But the typical policy tool that we are thinking about is carbon tax, for instance, or tax on dirty technologies. Well, this is one tool that's quite popular. But then what is the main negative implication of this? So today we have an advanced dirty technology, and effectively by imposing some heavy taxes on this, we are asking the current consumers to use less of it because it's polluting the environment. So as a result, if we impose really very heavy tax, it's as if we are making this dirty ladder or brown ladder shorter and shorter and shorter effectively. And ultimately the green ladder will be higher and the producers will naturally switch to green ladder. So that's one way of ensuring this transition. Impose very heavy tax on dirty technology, make the effective height of this dirty ladder, make it shorter and shorter and shorter. So in equilibrium, firms will find it more profitable to operate with green technologies, or consumer will find it better or cheaper to buy the green technologies. But effectively what we are doing is we are punishing the current generation very severely with that policy. Because effectively what we are telling them is that, look, there is this advanced technology today, but I don't want you to use it. And as a result, I'm going to really minimize your use of these dirty products or dirty technologies today because I want to ensure that the economy switches to green ladder. Okay, this is one way of going. But then there is potentially an alternative one, which is relying on R&D subsidies. So if we rely on R&D subsidy, for instance, green technology subsidy, in that case, what we will do is we will say, hey, today there is this dirty technology that's quite advanced, we agree, but keep using it, or at least reduce it at a certain level, but make sure that you don't advance on it anymore. But whenever you're investing in R&D, spend your R&D effort on the green ladder. So that way, instead of just relying on one tool, on the tax on dirty technology and trying to both minimize emission and also ensuring the technology transition, now we can potentially use two policy tools. One of them will be just taxing the dirty technology, but not necessarily to ensure the transition, but to minimize the emission to the level that we want. But to generate the transition in the long run, we can rely heavily potentially on green R&D. So these are the possibilities here. And the question is, what is the optimal combination? So just to illustrate this model a little bit more, the way we build our model is that there are these, we think of the economy as a combination of sectors between 0 and 1. There are many sectors or many product lines. And each product line, there are two ways of producing that technology or that product. There's a dirty version or brown version, and there's a green version. And by design or by construction, the green technologies are less advanced and the dirty technologies are more advanced. That's how we are initiating this model. And we are also estimating this model using patent data and the firm level data from US Census Bureau firms. And then once we estimate this model, we do some counterfactual policy exercises. And let me just show you some of those policy results that we find. So again, the basic structure of the model is that there is this continuum of sectors. In every sector, there are two alternative ways of using it. The dirty one is more advanced, but it's polluting the environment. So as a result, we have a realistic carbon cycle in the model to make sure that we have a realistic absorption of the CO2 by the ocean or by the environment. And then we have also a realistic implication for the temperature. And in this model, firms are also investing in R&D. And for instance, if firms are investing in green R&D, in that case, the quality of the green R&D green technology will improve over time. And eventually, green technology will generate creative destruction, meaning that the green technology will destroy because it's going to be superior relative to the dirty technology. But we are not there yet, right? This is going to happen in the future. And the question is, how can we ensure this green transition? And this is what happens if there's no policy intervention. Okay, this is the laissez-faire economy. On the x-axis, you see the number of years starting from today. And on the left panel, we show, we indicate the innovation effort of the firms in dirty innovation and clean innovation. So the dirty innovation is the dashed line, and the solid line is the clean innovation. If we don't intervene, and if we just let the market do, their decision, in that case, market will drift to dirty innovation. Why? Because of the market size. Dirty technologies are more advanced, it's more profitable. So as a result, if the government doesn't intervene, in that case, firms by themselves will just invest in dirty innovation, and they will keep advancing already advanced dirty innovation, and emissions will just keep rising. As a result, according to our simulations, the temperature relative to pre-industrial period, the temperature will keep rising, and in the long run, things won't be very, very rosy. So now let's look at the optimal policy implication of this model. Now we can ask, what is the time-dependent optimal policy combination between R&D subsidy and carbon tax? And here is the answer. The left panel is showing the dashed one is the R&D subsidy, research subsidy, the dashed one, and the solid one is the carbon tax that the model asked us to impose, or asked the policymakers to impose to maximize the welfare. And what comes out from this exercise is quite interesting. The model says that in the short run, the government has to be really aggressive with the R&D subsidies, but not so aggressive with the carbon tax. Over time, the carbon tax will keep rising, and to ensure that there's no coming back to dirty technology anymore, and we kill it for good. But in the short run, imposing heavy carbon tax on the current generation will be too costly. So that's why, to ensure a welfare maximizing transition, the model is asking for very aggressive R&D subsidy in the short run, and then keep building the carbon tax over time. So as a result, when we look at the temperature, change in temperature, there is a little bit of an increase, but then it is kept under control, and over time the nature kicks in and regenerates itself, and then the temperature is kept under control. So this is the welfare maximizing policy combination coming from this model of creative destruction, where there's a race between two alternative technologies. So just to summarize, optimal policy entails implementing a two-pronged strategy that combines early stage, very aggressive green subsidy, and then progressively higher carbon tax. Why? Because in the background, creative destruction will make sure that the adoption of greener alternatives will take place in the long run. Okay, so this is in the absence of any political economy considerations. But as I highlighted in the beginning of my talk, over the years through my research, I also witnessed that creative destruction doesn't work so smoothly in many industries. And as you can imagine, my guess is that in this industry, probably political economy issues will be very strong. So what do I mean by this? So here we are talking about creative destruction, which means that there are these entrants, meaning that there are these new firms coming up with new technologies. Entrants are pushing the technology frontier forward, and we made progress by entrants pushing the frontier forward. And then the question is, how will incumbents react to entrants? Now, incumbents, of course, can get motivated by this, and they can also become more innovative, and they can also try to push the frontier faster, so that there can be a race between entrants and incumbents, and this race can be very productive, and they can be very innovative jointly. But there's an alternative for incumbents, and that's exactly what the creative destruction literature also tells us. Incumbents have also a very strong incentive to resist the change. And if so, then of course we have to revisit all our intuition about creative destruction. Do we see evidence from any other industry on this particular resistance by incumbents? Now I will switch gears, and this is a recent paper that was published a couple months ago, where we looked at the Italian firms. And Italian economy is very interesting because first, the microdata is amazing. So what we did is we took the registry, we took the social security data of all Italian workers, and we merged that data with the registry of local politicians. Why local politicians? Well, of course, they are quite powerful, because whenever you want to do business, most of the time you need to get their approval, or you need to get some permission from municipality, or for infrastructure investment, again, you need to go through the municipality. But being a local politician is also a part-time job, meaning that you can be a politician, but at the same time, you can also work for a company and you can get paid. And this is totally legal, so this is allowed. And here we are talking about more than 500,000 local politicians. And we merge these two data sets, and we will ask a very simple question. So we look at the largest 20 firms in every market, and market is defined as the year, region, industry. Within every year, region, and industry, we look at the largest 20 firms, and we ask a very simple question. As the firm is becoming the dominant market leader, meaning number one, what happens to the number of politicians relative to the firm size? So here, 1 is the largest firm, it's the market leader. 2 is the second largest, 5 is the fifth largest, and 20 is the smallest among the largest 20 firms in this industry. So this is, now I'm going to look at the number of politicians relative to firm size. What's your guess? I guess you already have a guess on this, but this is the result. So as the firms are becoming the dominant market leader, the number of politicians relative to firm size is increasing. And this is not a mechanical result, because of course, as firms are increasing, they are more likely to hire a politician, but this is the intensity. Number of politicians relative to size is increasing. Well, you might say this by itself is not a bad news, because market leaders maybe are more innovative, and new technologies potentially require new regulations or new licenses, etc., and that's why they need to be close to the politicians. Well, to answer this, let's look at their innovativeness. How innovative are the market leaders relative to other firms? This is the answer. So when you put the two together, as you can see, as the firm is becoming the dominant market leader, innovativeness is going down, whereas the political connection is rising significantly. So this is already showing that probably market leaders, in order to make money or defend their market, they are not necessarily becoming more innovative, but they are potentially relying on other means, and being politically connected is probably one of them. So now if we think about this political economy issue, again, let me just go back to the earlier issue that we discussed. So this was the model that I highlighted before, but at the same time, in this model, everything was seamless, right? Everything was seamless. Governments are just implementing some policies, and we ask the optimal policy question. But at the same time, firms can also do lobbying in the background. And do we see some interesting patterns in the data on lobbying of the energy companies? And there is this very interesting recent paper by some LSE faculty. Here, I'm quoting some of their findings here. So Kwon, Lowry, and Verardo are showing that patents related to green technologies are concentrated within industries that rely heavily on brown means of production. So when you look at green patenting, first, it's very interesting that most of the green patenting are coming from industries that are very heavily relying on dirty production. So this is kind of a little bit of a puzzle, or maybe this might not be necessarily a bad news. But then the second thing that they are showing is that on average, firms that engage in green innovation, are equally likely to lobby for both green and brown legislative agendas. So this is kind of puzzling, right? Because if the firms are really going after green innovation and green transition, they should be just lobbying for green agendas, but that doesn't seem to be happening in the background. So another fact that they are showing in their very interesting paper is that among green innovators, firms whose current cash flow derive mostly from brown operations are more likely to lobby brown. So look at all the green inventors, and if a firm has operations in brown sectors, it keeps lobbying on again brown sector. So this means that firms' incentives are not one-to-one aligned with what's best for the society necessarily, because they have their market size and they will just react to market conditions. If they are already operating in brown sectors, even though they seem to produce some green patents, they won't go full force and they will just keep lobbying for brown technologies as well. So what will be the consequence of this? Well, the consequence of this would be that if the governments are still offering subsidies to brown technologies, this is just going to slow down the transition. And so that's why this is really a complicated problem. And do we see any evidence on this? Yes, we do. For instance, this is a graph that comes from a World Bank report. In Mexico, for instance, still there's very heavy involvement of the government support for fossil fuels relative to renewables. So yes, we want to ensure the green transition, but the speed of that transition very much depends on the policies that will be implemented. And yes, we can subsidize the green R&D, or we can make the green products more desirable for consumers. But if we just keep subsidizing the fossil fuels or dirty technologies, we will just slow down and we will just undo the positive effect that's associated with all these green subsidies, and we will just cancel out all these positive policy interventions. So that's why, first, the transition will be a function of the market size, because private firms will just keep reacting to market conditions. And we need to control the profitability of these products, obviously. And when we implement the policies, we have to ensure that these type of policies that are still subsidizing dirty technologies or dirty energy are not slowing down the transition. Otherwise, the whole process will be delayed and will be much less effective. So let me stop here, and I will be more than happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Excellent. Is this on? Yeah. Okay, first of all, thank you so much, Ufuk. We're really blessed to have you. We know you're a very busy but also prolific researcher, so thank you so much for taking the time, really. You initially said you'd have to run straight away, so if that is the case, we wouldn't take any questions. I'd be really brief. Again, thanks so much for making this so easily understandable in bringing your main points across. I know sometimes your lectures can involve a lot of Greek letters, which this time you were more parsimonious. At the Decarb Future Economy Forum, we always try to engage sort of this kind of research. I think what yours is particularly intriguing is that you show things which otherwise you couldn't show with this type of data. The very first time I actually saw that paper you presented as a working paper, I thought it was the Democratic Republic of the Congo just with better data, but no, that's not the case. Yeah, thanks so much. Well, all I can say, I guess, on this graph on the subsidies, it seems we're at the very beginning of it, since the main sort of policymakers, well, debating the largest green subsidy projects we've historically seen so far. So we hope we are at the beginning of that trend, keeping us below 1.5 degrees. That's good news. Again, thanks a million. And if we do have time, yeah.
Maybe we can take one or two very quick ones, yeah.
So the carbon price, yeah. Thank you so much. First disclosure, I'm not an economist, but very interesting models. In your plot that you showed, the carbon price or the carbon tax, I think, was percentages, and I was wondering if you could put numbers, or if you, in your model, do you actually have numbers on the cost per ton?
Mm-hmm. So that's a good question. So that's fairly easy to do. I don't have the numbers on top of my head, But given that we already calculated those, that's fairly easy to do. It's just that I don't have the numbers with me on top of my head, unfortunately.
No problem. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. There's one interesting question. There is one interesting question in the chat window. By the way, I should also emphasize that I think a big challenge here is also international. It's not only within country, but the international ones. So here, we just think about from a firm's perspective, but there are a lot of countries that are also natural resource rich countries, right? And their incentive to do the transition will be different, and convincing those countries to do the transition will be also internationally challenging. So that's why this is an extremely important question, but also extremely difficult question, which makes, for economists like us, it makes it also very interesting to do research, and also, political scientists and for a lot of researchers, this is an extremely interesting area to do research on. And one question on the financing of it. So indeed, there are now a lot of green finance that is floating around. And one interpretation of that paper that I cited in my presentation is that those companies that are mainly in the dirty technology or dirty energy business, they are trying to attract those financing, green financing to their company. So that's why on paper, they are doing some window dressing. At least that was one of the main takeaways of that paper, basically. They are doing window dressing by simply producing some patents, attracting those international money to their company. But in the background, they are lobbying for dirty technologies. So when it comes to financing, again, also the incentives are extremely interesting. There was one interesting comment in the previous panel when I was following that one, which argued that we have to be supportive for small to medium-sized firms, and I agree with that, because small to medium-sized firms have less to lose if there's creative destruction and if there's energy transition. The larger incumbents have more to lose. So as a result, using newer companies, younger, smaller and medium-sized companies to support with these new technologies will also overcome the political economy problem more easily. Otherwise, we might end up these window dressing type of strategies while in the background they are trying to still lobby for brown regulations. Yeah, please.
I might comment. I found that really interesting that you showed that the recruiting more politicians isn't correlated with more innovative activity. And I was just trying to think about it, that why is it the case that for some reason lobbying seems to be cheaper than switching to clean tech? And does that mean that there's a problem in terms of penalizing this window dressing or lobbying type of activity? Or alternatively, is there a real issue in terms of the switching costs and trying to understand those switching costs? Or is it sort of a third option that what we really need to be doing is like creating incentives that make it easier for scrappage of these huge hydrocarbon assets and some incentives that makes it more expeditious to retire these assets? I'm just very curious on your take on, across these three sort of ways of looking at the problem, what should we really be doing?
So that's an excellent question. I mean, we are not experiencing these problems for the first time either. Indeed, for instance, when the communist regime collapsed, there were also all these old technologies that were polluting big time, and so we had to get rid of them at the time. So it's all about incentives, of course. And I think first we need to understand the firm incentives better, and just asking firms to drop their weapon won't work, right? So again, firms are reacting to monetary incentives. So we need to find a good way to replace these old technologies. So the following is also a bad idea. So assume I have a very, I have a very advanced old technology, and maybe I don't have R&D capacity either, but I just ended up having this really big facility to produce with dirty technology. Then if you just come to me and say, hey, you know what, I want you to switch to green technology, I will do everything to resist because incentives are not there. But we need to make the life easier for these firms. And rather than pushing these firms to innovate themselves, we need to also extend the technologies, these better technologies, to these firms or to these countries as well. And this type of policy intervention will resolve the problem much easier. Because so if, for instance, I'm going to take a broader approach here, because the international aspect of this problem is I think, extremely fascinating. So if you just go to a poor country and say, you know what, I want you to switch to green technologies and I want you to innovate, but it's extremely hard for them to do. One thing you can do is that you can say, hey, you know what, you're going to lose quite a lot of money to do this transition. And as you said, Suganda, so I'm just going to compensate you for your loss. Well, this is a very, very temporary solution. I think the more organic or more long-lasting solution is to also extend them the technologies and to train them with these new green technologies rather than leaving them by themselves. And that way, organically, this transition will speed up. And not only they will switch to new technologies, but through also this human capital spillovers, because we will potentially train some engineers to use the green technologies in those countries, etc. This is going to both fix the incentive problem, but this can also fix the human capital problem. Because you also alluded on my research on human capital, and I try to think about these issues for quite some time. And as I said, they are all coming together now in my mind, that just asking a country or a firm just to shut down or to drop the dirty technology won't work. But we need to incentivize them organically by also extending the better technologies, cleaner technologies to them, and also potentially providing human capital support to both firms and to countries. And that way, organically, otherwise, if we give them a hurdle that's very high, it's a very high bar for them to clear, they won't do it. And they will do everything else to prevent the transition. So thank you so much again for the opportunity and for your comments and questions. Thank you.
Okay, I guess, yeah. Thanks again. Yeah. Thanks so much, Ufuk. And we're up for, some drinks, pretzels, and, further discussions on all these very important dynamics. Thanks so much.